Hi, my name is Susan Veasey, and I have been interested in history since I was a child. I have given history lectures at the Dothan, Alabama libraries for the past 6 years. Today, I thought I would talk about plagues, pestilence, and pandemics in history and how they got started and what damage and death came from these events. Sickness and death from diseases have been around since humans first walked the earth. We can start with the Bible and the plagues of ancient Egypt. According to a Bible dictionary, a plague is not just a disease gone amok. It is a judgment by God for the punishment of sin. The Egyptians had kept the Israelites as slaves, so God brought 10 plagues on them, such as bloody water, insects, destructive weather, and death. And here is a picture from the 10 Commandments showing how the water turned into blood. One of the earliest pandemics in history occurred in the middle of the 14th century. It was the bubonic plague, later called the Black Death. A good title for a horror movie, but this was not a movie, and it was real horror. The plague might not have happened if Pope Gregory IX had not decided that cats were evil, because they were associated with witches and Satan. And this fear led people to kill cats by the thousands. This superstition about cats is still around today. European ships carrying goods traded from towns around the Black Sea between Europe and Asia would dock at their home ports in Europe with rats on board. So the rats would escape into the cities and rural areas of Europe where the cat population had been severely decreased. You know the old saying, when the cat's away, the mice will play, or in this case, the rats, who no longer fear their predator. But it was not the rats that caused the plague. It was the fleas they carried, who would be the responsible party. The bacteria carried by the fleas would go into a person's bloodstream from a flea bite. The bacteria would swell a person's lymph nodes into tumors, both small and large, and they were filled with black fluid. This would be followed by vomiting and labored breathing, and death could come within 4 days. Doctors back then had their own personal protection equipment. And let me explain all the parts of it. He wears leather boots, all leather boots. He's got his long gown on. He's got his gloves. He's got his walking stick to keep people away. And he has a bird beak face mask. Would you wear something like that? I don't think so. But the beak contained flowers and herbs so that the doctor would not have to smell the putrid odor coming from his patients. He has a glass eye here. Doctors didn't know what to think about this plague. So they thought, well, if the chance of me looking at a person might give me the disease, I would be protected. And got his headgear on. After 3 years, the disease had killed between 25 and 40 million people in Europe, and millions more in Asia and Africa. It petered out after there was hardly any more people left in the killing fields. The plague continued to a much lesser degree in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. When it hit London and England in 1665, a small village in north-central England called Eyam, E-Y-A-M, did something we are familiar with today. They self-isolated. The village of 800 people depended on supplies from neighboring towns and paid for the supplies with coins left in containers of vinegar. 260 people died in the village within a year's time, but they kept the plague from spreading to the other towns in their area. This story is told in the historical novel Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks. European explorers and settlers brought smallpox to the Americas, beginning with Christopher Columbus. The native Indian population had no exposure or immunity to this disease, and many tribes lost hundreds, maybe thousands of people. Sometimes the smallpox infection was put on blankets given to the Indians, which was an early form of bioterrorism, in the hopes of wiping out their race so the white settlers could gain more land with less resistance from the Indians. Smallpox comes from the variola virus, of which chickenpox is a part of. Smallpox appears on the skin as a rash, which looks like small round craters filled with pus. Those who survive are left with scars or pock marks, mainly on the face, and the person will now have an immunity to the disease. Inoculation or vaccination of smallpox came in the 18th century, where pus from a person with a mild case was given by a cut to the skin of a healthy person to bring about immunity to the disease. I don't know if you can see this picture, but Dr. Edward Jenner, he is vaccinating or inoculating a child, a 9-year-old boy. It's kind of hard to see here. But he had taken the pus from a mild case of this woman here. She's bandaging her hand, so it's probably hard to see, but that was when they were vaccinating for smallpox. Commanding General George Washington, a survivor of smallpox, had his army inoculated when an outbreak occurred, as he could not afford to lose the Continental Army to smallpox. It would take another 2 centuries before smallpox finally disappeared. That would be in 1977 in the country of Somalia. And this is my favorite picture of George. He got a certain swagger about him in this picture. The southern United States were mainly afflicted by malaria or yellow fever in the 19th century along coastal areas and in cities like Memphis and New Orleans, located by the Mississippi River. It was thought that heat and humidity, or bad air, was the cause of yellow fever. Along the northern coast of Florida was the bustling town of Port St. Joseph, or Port St. Joe as we know it today. It was only 6 years old in 1841 when it was hit by a yellow fever epidemic. The people who could get away left the sick and dying to a few caretakers, leaving the town almost deserted. Over in Apalachicola, Dr. John Gorey would fashion a way to cool the rooms of yellow fever patients. He put blocks of ice in a large wash basin and using a chain or rope to hang the apparatus to the ceiling. Air would flow over the ice, cooling the room and bringing down the fever's temperature. Later, Dr. Gorey had a patent for an ice-making machine, which would be a forerunner to refrigeration and air conditioning. It wasn't until the Spanish-American War of 1898 that Army Doctor Walter Reed would discover that the mosquito bite was the reason people got yellow fever. The 2 centuries that yellow fever was prevalent in the United States would sicken 500,000 people and kill 100,000. The pandemic, which we have been taking lessons from in our time, is the Spanish flu of 1918. It got its name from Spain, which was the first nation to acknowledge this flu. It is unclear if the flu started at Fort Riley, Kansas, where a lot of horses and mules were kept. Burned manure ash was picked up by high winds, and the dust caused coughing and respiratory problems. However, other military installations were affected as well by the flu. And when U.S. troops were sent in April 1918 to fight in Europe in World War I, the flu was spread to soldiers of other nations. Living and fighting in trenches, which were deep open tunnels below ground, was an environment of mud, filth, and rats. I don't know whether you can tell, but here are some soldiers in a trench here, and they live constantly that way for 24 hours a day. And this was to protect them from being shot. That gave them a way to hide and to also shoot at the enemy. Troops coming home after November 1918 on crowded ships would bring the flu to the U.S. civilian population. There would be 3 waves of this flu before it ended in May 1919. President Woodrow Wilson nearly died from the flu when he was in Paris, France, for the peace talks after the war. Social isolation, disinfectant, and face masks were recommended just like today. Around 50 million people died worldwide, and over 650,000 Americans were killed, more than were killed during the Civil War. And I have a couple other pictures from that time. You see a group of women here all wearing face masks, which we are now familiar with. And they're not doing too much social isolation, but they are wearing face masks. And what I thought was good was they just all play baseball. They cover themselves with a face mask, the players and the umpire, but they still were playing baseball at the time. Today, we are in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic which we are still learning about and whose end is yet to be known. Its history is being recorded for posterity every day. I hope this journey into the past has been educational and enlightening to all of you. I thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this video. Good day and thank you.